understanding of the Holy Quran simply because they're not trained. They haven't been exposed to what is the correct message. So this is why we have Muslims who are also making the claim that the Quran should be banned. Okay, so what I'm saying is that we need to go to the right source. Okay, so we're not going to rely on the message of CNN to teach us Islam. Okay, we're not going to rely on the message of 680 News to understand Islam. You go to the source. Okay, if I want to, let me give a simple example. In the Bible, there's an incident which talks about Jesus coming into the church and expelling a group of people. He said, get out of the church. So now, if I look at this on myself, on my own, without the context, without the source, then what's going to happen? I'm going to think to myself, how can Jesus expel people out of the church? But then when I refer to the reverend, the priest, and I ask him, what's the context behind this? The reverend tells me that they were doing wrong things in the church. They were doing inappropriate things. They were causing a commotion in the church. And hence, Jesus felt that if you don't stop the annoyance or the inappropriate activities, then we would have no option but to ask you to leave. So now it's a better understanding. You know, I tell you that we're severing a child's limb. You're going to say, what the heck? Severing a child's limb? Cutting off a child's hand? But then if I give you the context, it's in the hospital up there because this child has a severe type of cancer, and if that limb is not severed, it's going to spread into the system, it's going to spread into the body, and it's going to lead to the death of the child. The only way, professional opinion, is that this child can only survive if that limb is severed. Now you got the context. Now you say, wow, okay, I understood. Makes sense. Okay, so there are numerous verses in the Holy Quran that if taken out of context, okay, you're not going to understand it. So two things, always keep in mind, whether Muslim or non-Muslim. If you're unsure about what the implication of the verse is, go to the source. You know, I'm not going to go to CNN to understand the verse, or to an individual who's not an Islamic scholar, recognized through the traditional system of how the Quran and Islam was taught. Okay? It's not a self-taught person, but rather a trained person through the proper Islamic traditions. Okay, this is why Islam is unique in one sense that every teaching has a chain. So for example, when I studied for 10 years Islamic theology, upon completion, they give us what we call a sanad, which means a chain that leads all the way to the Prophet Muhammad. So my teacher, and then he learned from his teacher, and then he learned from his teacher, that goes back to the companions, and then from the companions right to the Prophet Muhammad, and we have that written down. So that gives us the permission to teach the authentic Islamic traditions and the sciences. It's not a self-taught Islam. We don't just open the Holy Quran and say, I think this is what it means. We don't just open a translation of Sahih Bukhari, which is the tradition of the Prophet, the statements of the Prophet Muhammad, and say, this is what it is. And you don't know how many other hadith that are connected to this. Or what's the implication of this hadith? When was it said? What are the surroundings around it? And then we come to a conclusion. So who will do this? The scholar speaks in context. The layman speaks out of context. So this is why in order to understand any verse of the Quran, you got to go to the source. Go to what the Quran is saying and understand the interpretation through the scholar, through what we call the mufassir, the faqih, the person who's the jurist, the person who is the scholarly individual trained for that specific teaching. And also understand the context. Okay, there's a verse in the Quran that says, you know, kill them wherever you see them. Now if you just hear this, you'll say, there it is, terrorism in the Holy Quran. That's it. You know, one Imam, he was at an exhibition of some interfaith group, and you know, there were several stalls there. So you have a Christian booth, you have a Jewish booth, you have Buddhist, Hindu. So there was one booth on Islam. So the event was over and he was looking at the booths. He ended up in the Islamic booth. And there was one lady there who was looking at the Quran. She opened it and she came to a verse similar to this one. Kill them wherever you see them. There it is, terrorism. I always thought it, and there it is. I saw it today. Okay? So the Imam said, hold on, what's wrong? And then she said, look, you know, this is what I saw. Then he explained the context. That look at the verses that are before that, look at the verses that are after it, and let me explain to you what the situation was. That the Prophet Muhammad was with his people in a city called Mecca, and they were being persecuted. They were being tortured. Their people were being killed. Their belongings were being taken away. They were cornered. So now these people, they left to a city called Medina. And when they arrived there, they were somewhat at peace because the people welcomed them in that city. And they lived peacefully in coexistence with people of other faiths. Now this group of people that was in Mecca, they didn't like that. They couldn't see that the people that we didn't like, they went to another town and they're at peace. And they're being supported. So what they did is they sent some of their people from Mecca and they started killing the Muslims. They started taking their belongings. They started creating hell for the Muslims basically in Medina. So for 10 years, the instruction was they cannot even lift a finger against them. And when this verse came down, this verse said that these people who have assassinated your people, who have taken your belongings, they have, just usurped all your, they have done tremendous oppression against you. If you find those people, bring them to a court of justice, and if it so happens that they are the guilty ones, they are the people who are guilty, in that court of law they can be killed. Okay, and that's the system of today. Okay, what do we see when we see a serial killer? Okay, what do they say? Put him on in the US, put him on the chair. Okay, so criminals must be taken to task. So this is the context. Now when the Imam explained the whole context, I briefly mentioned it, but there's precise details about the verse. She understood. She understood what the message was. And then this Imam was also learned in Christianity. So he also referred to some verses where apparently it seems that there's violence being taught in the Bible. But then again, he said, let me give you the context of it. The Muslim scholar, the Imam said, let me give you the context of it and explain what is meant here, and then it makes sense. So this is what I'm trying to say here, that people misuse quotations. I saw a YouTube video where some prominent leader, he gave a speech. So what they did is they cut and pasted, they put it together in their own way, and it seemed totally negative. Okay, I'm giving a speech here. I've said many things. Now, if you cut and paste what you like, and you don't put it together the way it's supposed to be delivered, with the background, with the front end, the back end, etc., then it's going to seem negative. It's going to seem inappropriate. But if it's put into context and its place, then it makes sense. It's fallen into place. We know what's happening. So this is one message that I want you to leave with also before I conclude, is that whenever we want to understand the Holy Qur'an, Muslim or non-Muslim, go to the right source and understand the context of those verses. Now, I wanted to also a little bit talk about the obligation of Muslims to the Qur'an, and then I'm going to come to what I feel is also the obligation of the non-Muslim related to the message of the Holy Qur'an. So when it comes to the Muslims, firstly, Muslims should be reading the Holy Qur'an. And especially in this time and age, people are asking about the Qur'an. They're asking about the message of the Qur'an. And if I don't know the message as a Muslim, how can I portray the right message? Okay, how can I give the right context of the message? So we need to read the Holy Qur'an. We need to understand the message of the Holy Qur'an. Again, if we don't understand the message, how are we to live that message? How are we to create the awareness of that message? And practice, act upon it. Okay, if we have a wonderful teaching through the Prophet Muhammad, through revelation, sent by God Almighty, sent by Allah, and we adopt means or practices that are contrary to it, then this is basically saying that the Quranic message is not the right message for me. So we need to live the message of the Qur'an, and as I said, it's very practical. It's not impractical. It's real life. It can make sense. And that's why in Islam we don't have separation of church and state, because it's impossible. Okay, because God speaks about in the Holy Qur'an how to do business, how to interact, how to marry, how to deal with social issues, etc. And we create the awareness of what the message of the Holy Qur'an is. When we were talking about the pastor, ICNA in USA, this is an Islamic organization, after the pastor made the claim, they done a study of so many states as to how many people are researching the Quran, because it's created a buzz. Even though it was in a negative way, but it's created a buzz. They came to a conclusion that the majority of the bookstores across the United States, all the Qurans were sold out. All the Qurans. because people were reading the Holy Quran. They say, you know, there's this wacko pastor who wants to burn the Holy Quran, making this claim. Let us read the Quran for ourselves. And they began purchasing the Qurans. You know, where I serve my community in Islamic family, we had at least 10 calls. At least 10 calls, and they said, we want a free copy of the Holy Quran. Okay, I have a new Muslim brother that's with me in the room. And he tells me that every so often there are people contacting him, asking him if we want a free copy of the Holy Quran. So, people are interested. So if we're not creating the awareness and we're not giving the true message of the Quran, then the purpose will not be achieved. If we believe it's the truth, why are we keeping it with ourselves? We need to live it, we need to understand it, and we need to create the awareness related to it. Now when it comes to the non-Muslim, the obligation is explore the Holy Quran. I've mentioned earlier that it's not a new message. It's the same message that is found in the Bible and in the Torah. Many similar concepts. That's why when people of other faiths, particularly Christian and Jews, when they are addressed in the Holy Quran, they are given a special title. Okay? God Almighty says, Ya Ahlul Kitab, O people of the book. What is God saying here? God is saying that you have the book already, so if you understand the continuation of the message, is just reiterating the message that you have understood through the Prophet Jesus or the Prophet Moses. And for those people who don't belong to any faith, they may be atheists, they may be agnostics, they may be people that don't believe in a concept of God, they are also, appealed towards. God says, Ya ayyuhan nas, O humanity, read the message of the Holy Quran. It's a decision that you can make on your own, whether you feel it's truth or not. We'll leave that up to you. However, explore it for yourself. Don't rely on the message of others. As I said, go to the source, put it into context, and you will be able to understand the message of the Holy Quran. So when you put the source and the context in place, then you'll get the understanding. And again, God Almighty says in the Holy Quran, "La ikraha fi din." There is no compulsion in religion. So instead of being caught up in the negative, there was a CBC poll that was taken not too long ago. There were 2 questions that were asked. I think about 2,000 people answered the question. Question was, what do you think about Muslims, and how do you understand or perceive their religion? These were the 2 questions. The result of the answers were also 2. One was, the people said that Islam is an evil religion, it's bloodthirsty, it's violent, it doesn't give rights to women, it oppresses, it's not in context of the modern day, and they want to rule the whole earth. That's basically one type of answer. The other answer was, Muslims are like any other faith group. Okay, you have bad apples everywhere.